Bank manager dragged shy secretary to his office, unaware the millionaire CEO was coming. Clara Benson had learned to make herself invisible. 2 months into her job at Riverstone Bank, she'd mastered the art of keeping her head down, her voice quiet, and her tears private. Every harsh word from her manager, Mr. Harris, was a price she paid silently, because her mother's hospital bills didn't care about dignity. But on a cold Tuesday afternoon, invisibility wasn't enough. Harris lost his temper over a misfiled report. In front of a lobby full of customers, he grabbed Clara's arm, his grip tight enough to bruise, and dragged her toward his office, his voice dripping with contempt. The room went silent. Faces turned, whispers spread, and then the glass doors swung open. A man in a charcoal suit stepped inside, calm, commanding. His eyes swept the room and landed on the scene unfolding before him. The trembling secretary, the furious manager, the frozen staff. His jaw tightened. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. "Is this how you treat your employees here?" The words cut through the silence like a blade. Mr. Harris turned, irritation flashing across his face, until the regional head burst through the side door, face drained of color, and whispered something that made Harris go rigid. "Sir, that's Mr. Adrian Steele, the new owner." What happened next would change Clara's life forever, but it wasn't just about justice, it wasn't just about power. It was about a man who saw her when no one else did, and a love that grew in the space between respect and something far deeper. Before we dive in, drop a comment and tell us where you're watching from and what time it is for you right now. And if you're new here, hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications, because this story will stay with you long after it ends. The alarm clock on Clara's nightstand buzzed at 5:30 in the morning. It was the same relentless sound that greeted her every weekday, a sharp reminder that another day had begun whether she was ready for it or not. She reached over with a slow, tired hand and pressed the button to silence it. The room fell back into a heavy quiet, broken only by the distant hum of traffic outside and the soft, labored breathing coming from the next room. Clara lay still for a moment, staring up at the ceiling. The paint was cracked in places, thin spiderweb lines that had been there since they moved in. She'd stopped noticing them months ago, but this morning they seemed more pronounced. Or maybe she was just looking for something to focus on that wasn't the growing knot of anxiety in her chest. With a sigh, she sat up and swung her legs over the side of the bed. The floor was cold beneath her bare feet. She rubbed her face with both hands, trying to shake off the exhaustion that clung to her like a second skin. Sleep had been hard to come by lately. Between worrying about her mother and replaying every mistake she'd made at work, her mind rarely gave her peace. She stood and padded quietly to the bathroom, careful not to make noise. The apartment was small, 2 bedrooms, 1 bathroom, a cramped kitchen, and a living room that doubled as storage. It wasn't much, but it was all they could afford, especially now. Clara turned on the faucet and splashed cold water on her face. The shock of it helped, just a little. She looked at herself in the mirror, really looked, and didn't like what she saw. Dark circles under her eyes, skin that looked too pale, cheekbones that were a little too sharp. She'd lost weight over the past few months without meaning to. Stress and skipped meals had a way of doing that. She brushed her teeth, ran a comb through her brown hair, and tied it back into a simple, low bun. Nothing fancy. Nothing that would draw attention. That was the goal, after all. Stay quiet, stay small, stay employed. By 6, she was dressed in the same navy blouse and black skirt. She rotated through her work wardrobe. She'd bought 3 versions of the same outfit because it made mornings easier. One less decision to make, one less thing to worry about. In the kitchen, Clara moved with practiced efficiency. She made herself a thermos of coffee, cheap instant, but it did the job, and packed a small lunch. Leftover rice and steamed vegetables from the night before, portioned into a plastic container. She couldn't afford to buy lunch, and she'd learned quickly that the break room vending machine was a luxury she didn't have. The medical bills sat in a neat stack on the kitchen counter. Clara tried not to look at them, but it was impossible. They were always there, a constant reminder of why she couldn't afford to lose this job. Chemotherapy, radiation, medications, hospital stays, consultations, tests. The numbers blurred together after a while, but the total was always the same, more than she had. Her mother's illness had come on suddenly. One day she was fine, tired maybe, but fine. The next, she was in the emergency room, and the doctors were using words like stage 3 and aggressive treatment. Clara had been working at a bookstore at the time, a job she loved, but that barely paid minimum wage. When the store closed down 3 months later, she'd been desperate. That's how she ended up at Riverstone Bank. Clara picked up her worn leather bag, checked that her employee badge was inside, and took one last look around the apartment. Everything was in order. The dishes were washed, the bills were stacked. Her mother was still asleep. She stepped out into the hallway and locked the door behind her. The bus ride to Riverstone Bank took 40 minutes on a good day, longer if traffic was bad. Clara sat near the back, her bag on her lap, and watched the city wake up around her. Commuters filled the seats, most of them staring at their phones or staring at nothing. No one talked. No one made eye contact. It was a silent agreement they all shared. Mornings were for survival, not socializing. Clara liked the anonymity of it. Here she was just another face in the crowd. No one expected anything from her. No one judged her. She could simply exist. The bus stopped near the financial district, and Clara stepped off into the crisp morning air. The sidewalks were already busy with people in suits and heels, all moving with purpose. She joined the flow, her steps quick but unhurried. Riverstone Bank sat on the corner of 5th and Main, a sleek glass building that reflected the morning sun like a mirror. It was modern, imposing, and exactly the kind of place Clara had never imagined working. When she'd first been hired, she'd felt a flicker of pride. A real bank, a stable job, benefits. It had seemed like a lifeline. That feeling hadn't lasted long. Clara pushed through the revolving doors at 7:45, 15 minutes before her shift officially started. She liked arriving early. It gave her time to settle in, to prepare, to make sure everything was in order before the chaos of the day began. The lobby was already buzzing with activity. Tellers were setting up their stations. Customers were lining up at the service desk. The air smelled faintly of coffee and paper. Clara kept her head down as she crossed the lobby, offering polite nods to the few co-workers who acknowledged her. Most didn't. She was easy to overlook, quiet, unassuming, always in the background. She swiped her badge at the employee entrance and stepped into the back offices. Her desk was tucked in the corner of a cramped room shared by 3 other administrative assistants. It was small and cluttered with stacks of files, folders, and loose papers that never seemed to go away no matter how much she organized them. But it was hers, the one space in the building where she had some semblance of control. The bus ride to Riverstone Bank took 40 minutes on a good day, longer if traffic was bad. Clara sat near the back, her bag on her lap, and watched the city wake up around her. Commuters filled the seats, most of them staring at their phones or staring at nothing. No one talked. No one made eye contact. It was a silent agreement they all shared. Mornings were for survival, not socializing. Clara liked the anonymity of it. Here she was just another face in the crowd. No one expected anything from her. No one judged her. She could simply exist. The bus stopped near the financial district, and Clara stepped off into the crisp morning air. The sidewalks were already busy with people in suits and heels, all moving with purpose. She joined the flow, her steps quick but unhurried. Riverstone Bank sat on the corner of 5th and Main, a sleek glass building that reflected the morning sun like a mirror. It was modern, imposing, and exactly the kind of place Clara had never imagined working. When she'd first been hired, she'd felt a flicker of pride. A real bank, a stable job, benefits. It had seemed like a lifeline. That feeling hadn't lasted long. Clara pushed through the revolving doors at 7:45, 15 minutes before her shift officially started. She liked arriving early. It gave her time to settle in, to prepare, to make sure everything was in order before the chaos of the day began. The lobby was already buzzing with activity. Tellers were setting up their stations. Customers were lining up at the service desk. The air smelled faintly of coffee and paper. Clara kept her head down as she crossed the lobby, offering polite nods to the few co-workers who acknowledged her. Most didn't. She was easy to overlook, quiet, unassuming, always in the background. She swiped her badge at the employee entrance and stepped into the back offices. Her desk was tucked in the corner of a cramped room shared by 3 other administrative assistants. It was small and cluttered with stacks of files, folders, and loose papers that never seemed to go away no matter how much she organized them. But it was hers, the one space in the building where she had some semblance of control. Clara set her bag down, booted up her computer, and pulled out the stack of loan documents she'd been working on the day before. The work was tedious, data entry, filing, double-checking reports, but she didn't mind. It was straightforward, predictable, and it kept her busy enough that she didn't have time to think about everything else. She worked in silence for the first hour, her fingers moving quickly over the keyboard. The office gradually filled with the sounds of conversation and ringing phones. Marissa, one of the other assistants, arrived late as usual, breezing in with a coffee cup in hand and an apology on her lips. "Morning, Clara," she said, dropping her bag onto her desk. "Morning," Clara replied without looking up. "Any word on the inspection today?" Marissa asked, lowering her voice. Clara paused. "What inspection?" Marissa leaned closer, her eyes wide with excitement. "You didn't hear? Apparently some big shot is coming today, unannounced, a surprise visit." Clara frowned. "Who?" "Adrian Steele," Marissa whispered, as if saying the name too loudly might summon him. "The guy who bought out half the failing branches last year. Word is he owns a majority share now, and he's coming to evaluate operations." Clara's stomach tightened. "Today?" "That's what I heard. No one knows what he looks like, though. Super private. Doesn't do interviews, doesn't show up in public, just swoops in, makes decisions, and leaves." "That sounds ominous," Clara said quietly. Marissa shrugged. "Harris is freaking out. He's been barking orders since 6 this morning. Honestly, I hope this Steele guy fires him." Clara didn't respond. She didn't like Mr. Harris. No one did. But she also didn't like office gossip. It had a way of coming back to bite you. She returned to her work, trying to ignore the uneasy feeling settling in her chest. The morning passed slowly. Clara worked through her tasks with focused determination, pausing only to sip her coffee and stretch her stiff shoulders. Around 11, Mr. Harris emerged from his office, his face red and his tie slightly loosened. He scanned the room with sharp, critical eyes. "Benson," he barked. Clara's heart sank. She stood quickly. "Yes, sir?" "Where's the updated loan report I asked for yesterday?" Clara's mind raced. She'd finished the report and placed it on his desk before leaving the previous evening. She was certain of it. "I left it on your desk, sir," she said carefully. "Well, it's not there now, is it?" Harris snapped, striding toward her. "Do I have to do everything myself around here?" "I'm sorry, sir. I'll check again." "You'll check now." Clara nodded and hurried to his office, her pulse racing. She found the report exactly where she'd left it, beneath a stack of other papers on the corner of his desk. She picked it up and brought it back to him. "It was under your files, sir," she said softly. Harris snatched it from her hand without a word and walked away. Clara returned to her desk, her hands trembling slightly. She took a slow breath and tried to refocus. This was normal. This was just another day. The afternoon was quieter, or at least it started that way. Clara worked through a backlog of client files, organizing them by account number and date. It was mindless work, the kind that let her thoughts drift. She thought about her mother, about the next round of treatment scheduled for Friday. She thought about the bills piling up. She thought about how long she could keep this up before something broke. It was 3:15 when it happened. Clara was sorting through a drawer of archived loan documents when she noticed something off. One file had been placed in the wrong section, a commercial loan mixed in with the personal accounts. It was a small mistake, easily fixed. She pulled the file out and was about to refile it when a shadow fell over her desk. "What are you doing?" Clara jumped, nearly dropping the file. She turned to see Mr. Harris standing behind her, his arms crossed, his expression thunderous. "I found a misfiled document," Clara said quickly. "I was just going to put it back in the right place." "You found it?" Harris's voice was rising. "Or did you put it there in the first place?" "No, sir, This is exactly the kind of careless, incompetent work I'm talking about," he shouted, loud enough that heads turned in the main lobby beyond the office door. "Do you have any idea how much damage a misfiled loan can cause? Do you even think before you act?" Clara's throat tightened. "I'm sorry, sir. I didn't file it wrong. I was just trying to fix—" "Enough!" Harris's hand shot out and grabbed her arm, his grip firm and unforgiving. "Come with me. Now." He pulled her toward the door, dragging her through the narrow hallway that led into the main lobby. Clara stumbled, her face burning with humiliation as customers and co-workers turned to stare. She wanted to say something, to explain, but her voice caught in her throat. The lobby fell silent, and then the glass doors at the entrance swung open. A man stepped inside. He was tall, over 6 feet, and dressed in a charcoal grey suit that fit him like it had been tailored specifically for his frame. His dark hair was neatly styled, his posture relaxed but undeniably commanding. He moved with the kind of quiet confidence that didn't demand attention, but received it anyway. His eyes swept the lobby, taking in the scene with a calm, assessing gaze. And then they stopped. He saw the manager gripping the arm of a young woman. He saw her wide, frightened eyes. He saw the frozen faces of the staff and customers watching in uncomfortable silence. His expression didn't change, but something in the air shifted. The temperature seemed to drop. He walked forward, his footsteps deliberate and unhurried. "Is this how you treat your employees here?" he asked, his voice calm but edged with steel. Mr. Harris spun around, irritation flashing across his face. "Excuse me, this is a private matter." He stopped mid-sentence, because at that exact moment the side door burst open and the regional head, Mr. Caldwell, rushed in. His face was pale, his eyes wide with panic. He looked like a man who'd just seen his career flash before his eyes. "Mr. Harris," Caldwell said, his voice barely above a whisper. That's Mr. Adrian Steele." The words hung in the air like a death sentence. Harris's grip on Clara's arm went slack, his face drained of all color. Clara looked between the two men, her mind struggling to catch up. Adrian Steele, the new owner, the man everyone had been whispering about all morning, he was here, right now, and he'd just seen everything. Adrian Steele didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. "Let her go," he said quietly. Harris released Clara's arm immediately, stepping back as if he'd been burned. Clara rubbed her arm, her heart pounding so hard she could hear it in her ears. She didn't understand what was happening, but she could feel the shift in power like a physical force pressing down on the room. Adrian's eyes moved to her. They softened just slightly, and for a brief moment she saw something in them that wasn't anger or authority. It was concern. "Are you all right?" he asked. Clara nodded, unable to find her voice. He turned back to Harris and the softness vanished. "Your office. Now." It wasn't a request. It was a command, delivered with the kind of quiet authority that left no room for argument. Harris swallowed hard and walked stiffly toward the back offices, his shoulders hunched. Adrian followed, his movements calm and controlled. Caldwell hurried after them, looking like he might be sick. The lobby remained frozen for a moment longer. Then all at once the whispers erupted. Clara stood there, still trembling, still trying to process what had just happened. Jenny, one of the tellers, appeared at her side. "Clara, are you okay?" "I don't know," Clara whispered. 15 minutes later, Mr. Harris emerged from his office. His face was red, his jaw clenched so tight it looked painful. He didn't look at anyone as he walked past the front desk, grabbed his coat from the rack and left the building without a word. The glass doors swung shut behind him with a soft whoosh, and the silence that followed felt heavier than before. Caldwell came out next, his face still pale, his hands visibly shaking. He cleared his throat, and the sound echoed in the quiet lobby. Every eye turned to him. "Mr. Harris has been suspended pending an internal investigation," he announced, his voice tight. "Please continue your work as normal, thank you." He didn't wait for questions. He turned on his heel and disappeared back into the administrative wing, leaving the staff to exchange wide-eyed glances. No one moved, no one spoke. And then Adrian Steele stepped out of the office. He moved with the same measured calm he'd shown when he first walked in, but now the entire lobby was watching him, waiting, wondering what would happen next. His eyes scanned the room briefly, professionally, as if cataloguing every detail. Then they found Clara. She was still standing near the administrative entrance, her bag clutched in her hands, her arm still aching where Harris had grabbed her. She felt exposed, vulnerable, like everyone could see right through her. Adrian walked toward her. The room seemed to hold its breath. Clara's pulse quickened with every step he took. She wanted to move, to say something, but her feet felt rooted to the floor. He stopped in front of her, his expression unreadable but not unkind. "Miss," he began, then paused, waiting. "Benson," Clara said quietly. "Clara Benson." "Miss Benson," he repeated, as if committing it to memory. His voice was softer now, less formal. "I'd like to speak with you tomorrow morning, 9 o'clock. My office is on the top floor." Clara blinked, confusion flooding her mind. Why?" He almost smiled. Almost. "Because I think we have something to discuss." He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a business card. Simple, white, with clean black lettering. He handed it to her. Adrian Steele, Chief Executive Officer. Steele Investments Holdings. Below that, a phone number. Nothing else. Clara took the card with trembling fingers, staring at it like it might disappear if she blinked. "Tomorrow morning," Adrian said again. 9 o'clock. Then he turned and walked toward the exit, his footsteps steady and sure. The glass doors opened automatically, and he stepped out into the afternoon light without looking back. The lobby erupted the moment he was gone. "Did you see that?" He spoke to her directly. "What do you think he wants?" Maybe she's getting promoted. Or fired. Why would he fire her? Harris was the one who... Clara didn't hear the rest. She was staring at the card in her hand, her mind spinning in 1,000 different directions. What just happened? Jenny touched her shoulder gently. "Clara, are you sure you're okay?" Clara nodded automatically, though she wasn't sure of anything anymore. "Do you want to sit down? You look really pale." "I'm fine," Clara said, her voice barely above a whisper. I need to finish my work." She walked back to her desk on autopilot, sat down, and stared at her computer screen. The words blurred together. She couldn't focus, couldn't think. All she could see was Adrian Steele's face, the way he'd looked at Harris, the way he'd looked at her, and the question that kept repeating in her mind, "Why does he want to see me?" Clara barely remembered the rest of the day. She went through the motions, filing documents, answering emails, organizing reports, but her mind was somewhere else entirely. The business card sat on her desk, next to her keyboard, a constant reminder of the meeting that awaited her in the morning. By the time 5 o'clock rolled around, she was exhausted, not from the work, but from the weight of everything that had happened. She packed her bag slowly, said quiet goodbyes to the few co-workers still lingering, and made her way to the bus stop. The ride home felt longer than usual. Clara sat by the window, the business card now tucked safely in her wallet, and watched the city pass by in a blur of lights and movement. Her mind kept replaying the scene in the lobby, Harris's grip on her arm, the shocked faces, and Adrian Steele's voice, calm and unyielding. "Is this how you treat your employees here?" No one had ever stood up for her like that before, not at work, not anywhere. It didn't feel real. By the time Clara reached her apartment, the sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. She climbed the stairs to the second floor, unlocked the door, and stepped inside. Her mother was sitting in the living room wrapped in a blanket despite the warmth of the apartment. She looked up when Clara entered, her face thin, but her eyes still bright. "How was work, sweetheart?" she asked, her voice soft. Clara set her bag down and walked over, sitting on the edge of the couch beside her. "It was strange." Her mother's brow furrowed. Strange how? Clara hesitated. She didn't want to worry her mother, but she also needed to tell someone, needed to make sense of it. Something happened today, Clara began slowly. My manager, Mr. Harris, he got angry at me over a small mistake. He grabbed my arm and was pulling me toward his office in front of everyone. Her mother's expression darkened. He did what? But then this man walked in, Clara continued. The new owner of the bank, Adrian Steele. He saw what was happening and he stopped it. He suspended Harris on the spot. Her mother's eyes widened. Just like that? Clara nodded. Just like that. And then he asked to see me tomorrow morning. He gave me his card. She pulled it out and showed it to her mother. Her mother took the card, studying it carefully. What does he want to talk to you about? I don't know, Clara admitted. I'm scared it might be bad. What if he thinks I caused some kind of problem? What if he's going to let me go? Her mother handed the card back and took Clara's hand in hers. Her grip was weak, but her touch was warm. Clara, listen to me, she said gently. You didn't do anything wrong. From what you just told me, this man saw an injustice and he corrected it. That's not the behavior of someone who's going to punish you. But what if... No what ifs, her mother interrupted softly. You've spent your whole life making yourself small, thinking that if you stay quiet enough, nothing bad will happen. But maybe it's time to stop hiding. Clara's throat tightened. I'm not hiding. I'm just... careful. There's a difference between being careful and being afraid, her mother said, and I think you've been afraid for a long time. Clara looked down at their joined hands. Her mother was right, of course. She'd been afraid for as long as she could remember, afraid of losing her job, afraid of not being enough, afraid of what would happen if she stopped fighting to hold everything together. What if I go to that meeting and everything changes? Clara whispered. Her mother smiled, a small, tired smile. Then maybe that's exactly what you need. That night, Clara lay in bed staring at the ceiling, unable to sleep. Her mind kept circling back to the same thoughts, the same fears. What did Adrian Steele want? Why had he stood up for her? What would happen tomorrow? She rolled over and looked at the clock on her nightstand. It was past midnight. In less than 9 hours she'd be sitting in his office and she had no idea what to expect. Clara closed her eyes and tried to quiet her racing thoughts, but sleep didn't come easy. And when it finally did, it was restless and full of fragments. Harris's angry face, Adrian's steady gaze, the feeling of being seen for the first time in years. The alarm went off at 5:30, just like it always did. Clara woke with a start, her heart already pounding. For a moment she thought about calling in sick, about avoiding the meeting altogether, but she knew she couldn't. Whatever Adrian Steele wanted to say, she needed to hear it. She got out of bed and went through her morning routine on autopilot. Shower, coffee, breakfast she barely touched. She dressed carefully, choosing a grey dress and black cardigan, professional, understated, safe. Her mother was still asleep when Clara left the apartment. She paused at the door, looking back at the small space that had been home for the past 2 years. Everything felt fragile this morning, like the slightest shift could tip her entire world off balance. Clara took a breath, stepped into the hallway and locked the door behind her. The bus was crowded, as always. Clara stood near the back, holding onto the overhead rail, her mind a swirl of nerves and anticipation. She went over possible scenarios in her head. Maybe he wanted to ask her about Harris. Maybe he wanted her statement for the investigation. Maybe... She forced herself to stop. Speculation wasn't going to help. When the bus reached her stop, Clara stepped off into the crisp morning air and made her way toward Riverstone Bank. The building loomed ahead, glass and steel gleaming in the early sunlight. She walked through the revolving doors at 8:45. The lobby was quieter than usual. A few early customers stood at the teller windows. Staff moved about with subdued energy, still processing the events of the previous day. Clara didn't stop to talk to anyone. She headed straight for the elevators, her heart pounding harder with every step. The elevator doors opened with a soft chime. Clara stepped inside and pressed the button for the top floor. As the elevator climbed, she watched the numbers light up one by one. 3rd floor, 5th floor, 7th floor, and then finally, top floor. The doors opened. The executive level was nothing like the rest of the bank. The walls were painted a soft cream, the floors were real hardwood, and everything felt expensive in a way that was subtle but undeniable. There was art on the walls, real art, not prints, and the lighting was warm and carefully placed. A receptionist sat behind a sleek desk near the elevator. She was older, maybe in her 50s, with silver hair pulled back into a neat bun. She looked up as Clara approached, her expression polite, but assessing. "Clara Benson?" she asked. "Yes," Clara said, her voice barely steady. "Mr. Steele is expecting you, 3rd door on the left." Clara nodded and walked down the hallway, her footsteps soft against the runner rug that stretched the length of the corridor. She passed closed doors with nameplates she didn't recognize. Vice President of Operations, Chief Financial Officer, Senior Legal Counsel. And then she reached the 3rd door. There was no nameplate, just a simple brass handle. Clara took a breath, raised her hand, and knocked. "Come in," came the voice from inside. She opened the door and stepped into Adrian Steele's office. The office was large, but not ostentatious. A heavy wooden desk sat near the windows, which overlooked the city skyline. Bookshelves lined one wall filled with volumes on finance, economics, leadership, and history. There was a small sitting area with 2 leather chairs and a low coffee table. Everything was organized, intentional, and quietly powerful. Adrian stood by the window, hands in his pockets, looking out at the morning light. He turned when she entered. "Miss Benson," he said, his tone even, "please have a seat." He gestured to the sitting area, not the desk. It felt less formal, though no less intimidating. Clara sat in one of the chairs, her hands folded tightly in her lap. Adrian took the chair across from her, leaning back slightly, his gaze steady. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Then Adrian broke the silence. "How's your arm?" The question caught her completely off guard. "It's fine," Clara said quietly. "Just a little sore." He nodded, his jaw tightening briefly. "What happened yesterday was completely unacceptable. I want you to know that." "Thank you," Clara said, "for stepping in." "I didn't step in because I'm charitable," Adrian said bluntly. "I stepped in because what I witnessed was a violation of basic workplace standards. That kind of behavior has no place in any organization I'm responsible for." Clara nodded, unsure what to say. Adrian studied her for a moment, his expression unreadable. "Tell me about yourself, Miss Benson," he said. "How long have you been working at Riverstone?" 2 months. "And before that?" "I worked at a bookstore for 3 years. It closed down." "Why did you take this job?" Clara hesitated. The truth felt too personal, too vulnerable, but something in his eyes told her he wasn't asking out of idle curiosity. "My mother is sick," she said softly. "She's undergoing treatment. I needed stable income." Adrian's expression didn't change, but something flickered in his eyes. Understanding, perhaps, or recognition. "I see," he said quietly. "And how has your experience been here so far?" Clara looked down at her hands. "It's been manageable." "That's not an answer." She glanced up, startled by the directness. "It's a job," she said carefully. "I'm grateful to have it. Even when you're being treated the way Harris treated you yesterday." The question hung in the air, sharp and unavoidable. Clara's throat tightened. "I can't afford to complain." Adrian leaned forward slightly, his elbows resting on his knees. "What if I told you that you didn't have to?" Clara's heart skipped. "I don't understand." Adrian stood and walked to the window, his back to her. "I bought this bank 3 months ago," he said, "along with 4 others in the region. They were all failing, mismanaged, outdated, hemorrhaging clients and talent. I'm here to turn them around. Part of that process involves evaluating operations, staff, and leadership." He turned to face her. What I saw yesterday told me everything I needed to know about the leadership here. Clara's pulse quickened. Is that why you suspended Mr. Harris? I suspended him because he's a liability and a poor reflection of what this company should be. Adrian paused. But I'm not here to talk about him. I'm here to talk about you. Clara blinked. Me? I need someone I can trust, Adrian said. Someone who understands what it means to work hard, to show up, to push through difficulty without cutting corners or playing politics. Someone who won't waste my time. He crossed the room and sat back down, his gaze locked on hers. I'd like to offer you a position as my executive assistant. The words hit Clara like a physical blow. What? She stammered. You'd work directly with me, Adrian continued. Manage my schedule, handle correspondence, coordinate projects, conduct research, whatever I need. The pay is significantly higher than what you're making now, full benefits, and you'd have access to resources that could help with your mother's care. Clara's mind was spinning. This didn't make sense. She was nobody, just a secretary who'd been in the wrong place at the wrong time. Why me? She whispered. Adrian's expression softened just slightly. Because yesterday, when most people would have fought back or broken down, you stayed composed. You endured it with dignity. His eyes held hers. That tells me you're stronger than you think, and I need people like that. Clara's hands were shaking. I don't have experience as an executive assistant. You'll learn. I don't know anything about finance or corporate operations. You'll learn that too. Miss Benson, Adrian interrupted gently, I'm not offering you this position out of pity. I'm offering it because I believe you're capable. The question is, do you? Clara stared at him, her breath caught somewhere between hope and fear. Did she believe in herself? She thought of her mother lying in that hospital bed, fighting for every breath. She thought of the bills stacked on the kitchen counter. She thought of every time she'd swallowed her pride, bitten her tongue, made herself invisible just to survive. And she thought of the man sitting across from her, who had seen her at her lowest and still thought she was worth something. Yes, she said, her voice stronger than she expected. I do. Adrian smiled, a real smile this time, small but genuine. Good, he said. You start Monday. If you've ever been given a second chance when you needed it most, drop a comment below. And if this story is speaking to you, don't forget to hit that like button. Clara walked out of Adrian Steele's office in a daze. Her feet moved automatically, carrying her down the hallway toward the elevator, but her mind was somewhere else entirely. She couldn't process what had just happened. One moment she was certain she was about to be reprimanded or let go, and the next she was being offered a position she'd never dreamed of. Executive assistant to the CEO. The words didn't feel real. The elevator doors opened with a soft chime, and Clara stepped inside. She pressed the button for the ground floor and watched the numbers descend. 5th floor, 3rd floor, lobby. When the doors opened, the noise of the bank hit her all at once. Phones ringing, customers talking, the hum of daily operations. It felt surreal, like she'd stepped out of one world and back into another. Jenny was at the teller counter and caught sight of Clara immediately. Her eyes went wide, and she quickly finished with her customer before hurrying over. Clara, she whispered urgently. What happened? Are you okay? What did he say? Clara opened her mouth, but the words stuck in her throat. How could she possibly explain? He offered me a job, she finally managed. Jenny blinked. What kind of job? Executive assistant. To him. Jenny's jaw dropped. Are you serious? Clara nodded slowly, still not quite believing it herself. Oh my God, Jenny breathed. Clara, that's incredible. When do you start? Monday. This Monday? Yes. Jenny grabbed Clara's hands. Her face lit up with genuine excitement. This is amazing. You deserve this. After everything Harris put you through, I don't know if I deserve it, Clara interrupted quietly. I don't even know why he picked me. Because you're good at what you do, Jenny said firmly, and because you're kind and hard-working, and clearly he saw that. Clara wanted to believe her, but the voice in the back of her mind, the one that had kept her small and quiet for so long, whispered doubts. What if you're not good enough? What if you fail? What if this is all a mistake? She pushed the thoughts away and forced a smile. I should get back to work. I still have the rest of the week here. Jenny squeezed her hands once more. I'm so happy for you, Clara. Really. Thank you, Clara said softly. She walked back to her desk, sat down, and stared at her computer screen. The familiar stack of files and folders sat beside her keyboard, the same tasks she'd been working on for weeks, but now they felt different, temporary. In 4 days, none of this would be hers anymore. In 4 days, everything would change. The rest of the week passed in a strange blur. Word spread quickly about Clara's promotion, and reactions were mixed. Some co-workers congratulated her warmly. Others looked at her with thinly veiled suspicion or envy. A few avoided her altogether, as if proximity to her sudden rise might somehow taint them. Clara tried to ignore it. She kept her head down and focused on finishing her remaining tasks. She wanted to leave her work in order, to make the transition as smooth as possible for whoever would take over her position. But it was hard to concentrate. Every time she thought about Monday, her stomach twisted with a combination of excitement and terror. She'd never worked in an executive role before. She'd never been anyone's assistant, let alone the assistant to someone like Adrian Steele. What if she messed up? What if he realized he'd made a mistake? On Thursday afternoon, Clara received an email from Human Resources. The subject line read, New Position Details, Executive Assistant to CEO. Her hands trembled slightly as she opened it. The email outlined her new salary, benefits, and start date. When Clara saw the salary figure, she had to read it 3 times to make sure she wasn't misreading. It was more than double what she was currently making. More than double. Clara's vision blurred and she realized she was crying. She quickly wiped her eyes, glancing around to make sure no one had noticed. The last thing she needed was more attention, but the relief washing over her was overwhelming. She could pay for her mother's treatments. She could cover the bills without choosing between medication and groceries. She could breathe. For the first time in months, she felt like maybe, just maybe, things were going to be okay. That evening, Clara came home to find her mother sitting in the living room, a blanket draped over her lap, and a book resting in her hands. She looked up when Clara entered, and a soft smile crossed her face. You look lighter today, her mother said. Clara set her bag down and sat beside her on the couch. I got the details about my new position. And? Clara pulled out her phone and opened the email, handing it to her mother without a word. Her mother read it slowly, her eyes widening as she reached the salary section. She looked up at Clara, tears welling in her eyes. Clara, this is... I know, Clara whispered. Her mother set the phone down and pulled Clara into a gentle hug. Her arms were thin and weak, but her embrace was full of warmth. I'm so proud of you, she murmured. Clara closed her eyes and let herself sink into the moment. For once, she wasn't thinking about what could go wrong. She was just here, in this moment, with her mother. And it was enough. Friday was Clara's last official day in the administrative department. She spent the morning organizing files, writing detailed notes for her replacement and tying up loose ends. Marissa stopped by her desk around lunchtime with a cupcake she'd bought from the bakery down the street. A little goodbye gift, Marissa said with a grin. Though it's not really goodbye since you'll still be in the building. Clara smiled. Thank you. That's really sweet. Are you nervous about Monday? Terrified, Clara admitted. You'll be great, Marissa said confidently. And if you ever need anything, even just someone to vent to, you know where to find me. Clara felt a lump form in her throat. Thank you, really. By the time 5 o'clock rolled around, Clara's desk was clean. Everything was labeled, filed, and organized. She took one last look at the small corner space that had been hers for the past 2 months, then picked up her bag and headed for the exit. As she walked through the lobby, she glanced up toward the top floor. Somewhere up there, Adrian Steele was probably still working, and on Monday she'd be up there too. The thought sent a shiver of anticipation through her. The weekend passed slowly. Clara spent Saturday cleaning the apartment, doing laundry and meal prepping for the week ahead. She wanted to be as organized as possible so that Monday morning wouldn't feel so chaotic. On Sunday, she went through her closet 3 times, trying to figure out what to wear. Everything felt either too casual or too formal. She finally settled on a simple black dress with a grey blazer, professional but not over the top. That night, Clara barely slept. She lay in bed staring at the ceiling, running through scenarios in her mind. What if she showed up and Adrian had changed his mind? What if she made a mistake on her first day? What if— "Stop," she told herself firmly. Her mother's words echoed in her mind. Sometimes kindness comes from unexpected places. Don't be afraid of it. Clara took a deep breath and closed her eyes. Tomorrow, her life would change. And for the first time in a long time, she was ready. Monday morning arrived with a sky full of clouds and the smell of rain in the air. Clara woke at 5, even though she didn't need to leave until 7:30. She couldn't sleep anymore. Nervous energy buzzed through her like electricity. She showered, dressed carefully, and made herself a light breakfast she could barely eat. Her mother was still asleep, so Clara left a note on the kitchen counter. "First day. Wish me luck. Love you." She grabbed her bag, checked her reflection one last time, and stepped out into the hallway. The bus ride felt longer than usual. Clara sat near the window, watching the city wake up around her. People hurried along sidewalks with coffee cups in hand. Cars honked in traffic. The world moved at its usual frantic pace. But for Clara, everything felt different. When the bus reached her stop, she stepped off and walked toward Riverstone Bank with her heart pounding in her chest. The building looked the same as always, tall, glass, imposing. But today, Clara wasn't walking in as just another employee. Today, she was walking in as someone important. She pushed through the revolving doors and crossed the lobby. A few familiar faces looked up and offered polite nods. Clara nodded back, but didn't stop to talk. She headed straight for the elevators and pressed the button for the top floor. The receptionist greeted her warmly when the elevator doors opened. "Good morning, Miss Benson. Mr. Steele is expecting you. Your office is the first door on the right, just next to his." "Thank you," Clara said, her voice steadier than she felt. She walked down the hallway, her footsteps soft against the polished floor. When she reached the first door on the right, she paused. Her office. She opened the door and stepped inside. The space was small, but beautiful. A polished wooden desk sat near the window, which overlooked the city skyline. There was a comfortable chair, a computer, a phone, and a small shelf with a few organizational supplies. On the corner of the desk sat a vase with fresh white lilies. Clara set her bag down slowly, taking it all in. This was hers. She sat down in the chair and ran her hands over the smooth surface of the desk. Everything felt surreal, like she was living someone else's life. A soft knock on the doorframe made her jump. She turned to see Adrian standing in the doorway, dressed in a dark navy suit, his expression calm and professional. "Good morning," he said. "Good morning," Clara replied, standing quickly. "Settling in?" "Yes, sir. Thank you." "Adrian," he corrected gently. "We're going to be working closely. There's no need for formality." Clara nodded, though calling him by his first name still felt strange. Adrian stepped into the office and handed her a folder. "This is your agenda for the week. I've outlined your primary responsibilities, along with a few projects I'll need your help with. We'll go over everything in detail this morning." Clara took the folder, flipping it open. The pages inside were neatly organized, each task clearly labeled with deadlines and notes. "I also want you to familiarize yourself with my schedule," Adrian continued. "I have back-to-back meetings most days, and I'll need you to manage conflicts, coordinate with other departments, and keep everything running smoothly." "Understood," Clara said. "If you have questions, and you will, ask. I'd rather you get it right than guess." "Thank you." Adrian studied her for a moment, his gaze thoughtful. "You're going to do fine, Clara." The use of her first name caught her off guard. It felt personal, almost intimate. "I hope so," she said quietly. "I know so." He glanced at his watch. "I have a meeting in 15 minutes. Take the morning to get oriented. We'll regroup after lunch." "Okay." Adrian turned to leave, then paused at the door. "And Clara?" "Yes?" "Welcome to the team." He left before she could respond. Clara stood there for a moment, clutching the folder to her chest, a small smile tugging at her lips. She could do this. She would do this. The first few days were a whirlwind. Clara threw herself into her work with a focus she didn't know she had. She learned the scheduling software, memorized the names and titles of key staff members, and familiarized herself with the dozens of ongoing projects Adrian was overseeing. It was overwhelming at times. There was so much information, so many moving parts, but Clara refused to let herself fall behind. She stayed late every night, reviewing notes and preparing for the next day. Adrian noticed. On Wednesday evening, around 7 o'clock, he knocked on her office door. Clara looked up from her computer, surprised to see him still in the building. "You're still here," he said. "So are you," Clara replied. He smiled faintly. "I don't have anyone waiting for me at home. What's your excuse?" Clara hesitated. "I just want to make sure I'm doing everything right." Adrian stepped into the office and leaned against the doorframe. "You are, but you don't need to work yourself into the ground to prove it. I'm not—" "Clara." His tone was gentle but firm. "You've been here past 7 every night this week. I appreciate the dedication, but I also need you to pace yourself. This isn't a sprint. It's a marathon." Clara looked down at her hands. "I just don't want to let you down." "You couldn't if you tried." The words hit her harder than she expected. She looked up, meeting his gaze. "I mean it," Adrian said. "You're doing excellent work. But I need you to take care of yourself too." Clara nodded slowly. "Okay." "Good." He straightened. "Go home, get some rest. That's an order." Clara couldn't help but smile. "Yes, sir." "Adrian," he corrected, shaking his head with a faint grin. "Adrian," she repeated. He left, and Clara packed up her things, her heart feeling strangely light. Over the next few weeks, Clara settled into her new role. She learned the rhythms of Adrian's workday, anticipated his needs before he voiced them, and handled the constant flow of emails, calls, and meetings with increasing confidence. But more than that, she began to see a side of Adrian Steele that the rest of the world didn't. He wasn't the cold, ruthless CEO people whispered about. He was thoughtful, strategic, and deeply committed to doing things the right way. He treated his staff with respect, listened to their concerns, and made decisions based on principle, not profit alone. And he was kind, not in an overt, showy way, but in small, quiet gestures. Like the afternoon, he noticed Clara rubbing her temples and brought her a bottle of water and aspirin without her asking. Or the morning he rearranged his schedule so she could leave early for her mother's doctor's appointment. Or the day he found out she'd been skipping lunch and had food delivered to her office, with a note that simply said, "Eat." Clara tried not to read too much into it. He was her boss. This was professional. But sometimes, when their eyes met across the conference table or when he smiled at something she said, she felt something shift, something she didn't dare name. It was late on a Friday evening, nearly a month into her new position, when everything changed. Clara was finishing up a report for Monday's board meeting. The office was quiet. Most of the staff had gone home hours ago. She was so focused on her work that she didn't hear Adrian approach until he knocked lightly on her open door. She looked up, startled. "Still here?" he asked, though there was no surprise in his tone. He'd come to expect it. "Just wrapping up," Clara said. Adrian walked into her office and glanced at her screen. "The board presentation?" "Yes, I wanted to make sure all the data was accurate." "It is. I reviewed it earlier." He paused. "You've been working 12-hour days all week." "So have you." He smiled. "Touché." For a moment, neither of them spoke. The silence wasn't uncomfortable, it was something else, something heavier. Adrian exhaled slowly and turned to face her. "Can I ask you something?" Clara nodded. "Why do you push yourself so hard?" The question caught her off guard. I don't want to fail." That's not an answer. Clara looked down at her hands. I spent most of my life being invisible, being overlooked. When you offered me this position, it felt like someone finally saw me. I don't want to prove them wrong. Them? Adrian asked gently. Everyone who ever told me I wasn't enough. The words came out before she could stop them, raw and honest. Adrian was quiet for a long moment. Then he pulled out the chair across from her desk and sat down. Do you want to know why I really offered you this job? He asked. Clara looked up, her heart pounding. Because when I saw you in that lobby, being dragged and humiliated in front of everyone, you didn't fight back. You didn't scream or cause a scene. You endured it with a grace I've rarely seen. He leaned forward slightly. And when I looked into your eyes, I didn't see weakness. I saw strength. The kind of strength that comes from surviving things that should have broken you. Clara's breath caught in her throat. I grew up with nothing, Adrian continued, his voice quieter now. My parents died when I was 16. Car accident. I was put into the foster system, bounced around between homes where no one really wanted me. I worked 3 jobs to put myself through community college, then state school. Every step of the way, people told me I'd never make it, that I didn't have what it took. Clara stared at him, seeing him in a completely different light. So when I saw you that day, Adrian said, I recognized something. Someone who'd been knocked down but refused to stay there. Someone who kept going even when it hurt. He paused. I didn't offer you this job out of pity, Clara. I offered it because I saw myself in you, and I knew that if given the chance, you'd prove everyone wrong. Clara felt tears prickling at the corners of her eyes. She blinked them back. Have I? She asked softly. Proved them wrong? Adrian's expression softened. Every single day. The weight of his words settled over her like a blanket. For so long, Clara had been waiting for someone to tell her she was enough, that she mattered, that she was seen, and here he was, saying exactly that. Thank you, she whispered. For what? For seeing me. Adrian held her gaze, and something passed between them, something unspoken but undeniable. He stood slowly. It's late. Let me walk you to your car. I take the bus, Clara said. Adrian frowned. At this hour? It's fine. I do it all the time. Not tonight. He pulled out his phone. I'm calling you a car. Adrian, you don't have to. I know I don't have to. I want to. His tone left no room for argument. Clara nodded, her heart doing something dangerous in her chest. 10 minutes later, a sleek black car pulled up to the curb outside Riverstone Bank. Adrian walked Clara down to the lobby and held the door open for her. Thank you, she said again. Any time. He hesitated, then added, and Clara, take the weekend off. Actually take it off. No emails, no reports, just rest. She smiled. I'll try. That's an order, he said, but his tone was warm. Clara climbed into the car, and as it pulled away from the curb, she looked back to see Adrian still standing there, watching until she was out of sight. That weekend, Clara actually listened. She didn't check her email. She didn't review reports or prep for the week ahead. Instead, she spent time with her mother, watching old movies, cooking together, talking about things that had nothing to do with work. Her mother's treatments were going well. The doctors were cautiously optimistic. And for the first time in months, Clara allowed herself to feel hopeful. On Sunday evening, as they sat together on the couch, her mother turned to her with a knowing look. You're different lately, she said. Clara looked over. Different how? Lighter, happier. Her mother smiled. Does this have anything to do with your very handsome and very kind boss? Clara's cheeks flushed. Mum, I'm just saying, her mother continued with a teasing glint in her eye. You talk about him a lot. I do not. Clara, every other sentence this past month has started with Adrian said or Adrian thinks. Clara opened her mouth to protest, then closed it again. Her mother wasn't wrong. It's not like that, Clara said quietly. He's my boss. And, her mother pressed gently, and that's all it can be. Her mother reached over and took her hand. Why? Because men like him don't end up with women like me, Clara said, the words coming out more vulnerable than she intended. He's brilliant and successful and I'm just me. Just you? Her mother's expression turned serious. Clara Marie Benson, you are one of the strongest, kindest, most resilient people I know. Any man would be lucky to have you in his life. Clara squeezed her mother's hand but didn't respond, because even if her mother believed it, Clara wasn't sure she did. Monday morning arrived with clear skies and a crispness in the air that hinted at the coming autumn. Clara arrived at the office at 8:30, feeling more rested than she had in weeks. She took the elevator to the top floor, greeted the receptionist, and headed to her office. There was a coffee cup on her desk, still warm. Next to it was a small note written in clean, precise handwriting. Thought you might need this. Welcome back. Clara picked up the cup and took a sip. It was exactly how she liked it. 1 cream, no sugar. Her heart did that dangerous thing again. She was still smiling when Adrian knocked on her doorframe a few minutes later. Good morning, he said. Good morning. Thank you for the coffee. You're welcome. He leaned against the doorframe, looking more relaxed than she'd ever seen him. Did you actually rest this weekend? I did. Good. He paused. I have something I need to run by you. Of course. What is it? Adrian stepped into her office and closed the door behind him, something he rarely did. Clara's pulse quickened. There's a charity gala this Saturday night, he began. It's for the Children's Hospital Foundation. I'm one of the primary sponsors, and I'm expected to attend. Clara nodded, already pulling up her calendar. I'll make sure it's on your schedule. I'd like you to come with me. Clara's fingers froze over her keyboard. What? As my guest, Adrian clarified. These events are important for networking and relationship building. I could use someone there I actually trust. Clara's mind was racing. A gala, with Adrian as his guest. I don't know if I have anything appropriate to wear, she stammered. That's already taken care of. Adrian pulled out a business card and handed it to her. There's a boutique downtown. They're expecting you tomorrow at noon. Pick whatever you like. It's on the company. Adrian, I can't. You can, and you will. His tone was firm but not unkind. Consider it part of the job. I need you there, Clara. The way he said her name sent a shiver down her spine. Okay, she said softly. I'll be there. Adrian smiled. A real, genuine smile that reached his eyes. Good. I'll pick you up at 6. He left before she could overthink it. Clara sat at her desk, staring at the business card in her hand, her heart pounding. This was still professional, she told herself. Just work. Nothing more. But deep down she knew she was lying to herself. The next day at noon, Clara found herself standing in front of an elegant boutique in the heart of downtown. The windows displayed gowns that looked like they cost more than her monthly rent. She almost turned around and left, but then she remembered Adrian's words. I need you there. She took a breath and pushed open the door. A woman in her 50s with perfectly styled silver hair looked up from behind the counter and smiled warmly. You must be Clara, she said. Mr. Steele called ahead. I'm Margaret. We're going to find you something absolutely stunning. For the next hour, Margaret pulled gown after gown, each more beautiful than the last. Clara tried on emerald green silk, midnight blue satin, deep burgundy velvet. But when she stepped out of the dressing room in a floor-length gown, the color of champagne, elegant, understated, with delicate beading along the bodice, Margaret's face lit up. That's the one, she said. Clara turned to look at herself in the mirror. She barely recognized the woman staring back at her. The gown fit perfectly, hugging her figure in all the right places, without being too revealing. The color brought out the warmth in her skin, and the beading caught the light like stars. She looked beautiful. Mr. Steele is going to have a hard time keeping his eyes off you, Margaret said with a knowing smile. Clara's cheeks flushed. It's just a work event. Of course it is, dear, Margaret said, but her tone suggested she didn't believe that for a second. Saturday evening arrived too quickly. Clara spent the entire day in a state of nervous anticipation. She'd had her hair done that morning, soft curls pinned elegantly to one side. Her makeup was subtle, but polished, and the gown hung on the back of her bedroom door like a beautiful, terrifying promise. Her mother had insisted on helping her get ready despite her own fatigue. "You look like a princess," her mother said, tears in her eyes as Clara stepped out of her room fully dressed. "I look ridiculous," Clara muttered, tugging at the gown. "You look perfect." Her mother walked over and gently adjusted a curl. "And that man is going to realize just how lucky he is." "Mom, it's not—" The doorbell rang. Clara's heart leapt into her throat. Her mother smiled. "That's your Prince Charming." "Stop," Clara said, but she was smiling despite herself. She walked to the door, took a breath, and opened it. Adrian stood on the other side, dressed in a perfectly tailored black tuxedo. His hair was styled neatly, and he looked every bit the powerful, successful man he was. But when his eyes landed on Clara, everything else seemed to fall away. He stared at her for a long moment, his expression unreadable. "Wow," he finally said, his voice quiet. Clara's cheeks burned. "Is it too much?" "No." Adrian's gaze traveled over her slowly, taking in every detail. "You look incredible." "Thank you," Clara whispered. "You look very handsome." Adrian smiled, a soft, genuine smile. "Are you ready?" Clara nodded. She turned to say goodbye to her mother, who was watching from the living room with barely concealed delight. "Have a wonderful time, sweetheart," her mother said. "I will." Adrian offered Clara his arm and she took it, her hand resting lightly in the crook of his elbow. As they walked to the waiting car, Clara couldn't shake the feeling that tonight was going to change everything. The gala was held at the Grand Ellison Hotel, a historic building with soaring ceilings, crystal chandeliers, and marble floors that gleamed under the soft lighting. Clara had never been anywhere so elegant. Adrian kept his hand on the small of her back as they entered, guiding her through the crowd. People turned to look at him, at her, at them, together. Clara felt the weight of their stares, but tried to ignore it. "You okay?" Adrian asked quietly. "A little overwhelmed," Clara admitted. "You're doing great." His hand pressed gently against her back, reassuring and steady. They made their way through the ballroom, stopping occasionally so Adrian could greet colleagues and donors. He introduced Clara simply as "my executive assistant," but the way he said it, with pride and warmth, made it feel like so much more. After an hour of mingling, they finally found their table. Adrian pulled out Clara's chair for her and she sat, grateful for the chance to catch her breath. Dinner was served, an elegant 5-course meal that Clara barely tasted. She was too aware of Adrian sitting beside her, too conscious of the way his knee occasionally brushed against hers under the table. After dinner, the music started. A live orchestra played soft, classical pieces, and couples began to move onto the dance floor. Adrian turned to Clara. "Would you like to dance?" Clara's heart hammered. "I'm not a very good dancer." "Neither am I," Adrian said with a small smile. "But I'd still like to try. With you." How could she say no to that? She placed her hand in his, and he led her onto the dance floor. Adrian's hand settled on her waist, and Clara's hand rested on his shoulder. They began to move, slow and careful, finding their rhythm together. "See," Adrian said softly. "Not so bad." Clara looked up at him, and for a moment, the rest of the room faded away. It was just the two of them, moving together in the soft glow of the chandeliers. "Thank you," Clara said. "For what?" "For bringing me tonight, for everything." Adrian's gaze held hers, intense and searching. "Clara, I didn't bring you here because I needed an assistant." Her breath hitched. "Then why?" "Because I wanted you here. With me." The honesty in his voice made Clara's heart race. "Adrian," she began, but she didn't know how to finish. He pulled her a little closer, his hand warm against her back. "I know this complicates things. I know I'm your boss and that there are lines we probably shouldn't cross. but I can't keep pretending I don't feel this. Clara's pulse thundered in her ears. Feel what? Adrian stopped dancing. He looked at her with an intensity that took her breath away. That I'm falling for you. The world tilted. Clara stared at him, unable to speak, unable to breathe. You don't have to say anything, Adrian continued quickly. I just needed you to know. Because every day I work with you, every conversation we have, every time you smile, it gets harder to pretend this is just professional. Clara's eyes burned with tears she refused to let fall. I thought I was imagining it. You weren't. I didn't think someone like you could ever... She trailed off, unable to finish. Someone like me? Adrian's brow furrowed. Clara, you're brilliant, kind, strong, and beautiful. If anything, I'm the one who doesn't deserve you. A tear slipped down her cheek before she could stop it. Adrian reached up and gently wiped it away with his thumb, his touch achingly tender. I don't want to pressure you, he said softly. And I don't want to make you uncomfortable, but I needed you to know how I feel. Clara looked into his eyes, those steady, honest eyes that had seen her from the very beginning, and she made a choice. I'm falling for you too, she whispered. Adrian's expression shifted. Relief, joy, something deeper. Yeah? He asked, his voice rough with emotion. Yeah. He smiled, a real, unguarded smile that made Clara's heart soar. And then, right there on the dance floor, surrounded by strangers and soft music, Adrian Steele leaned down and kissed her. It was gentle, tentative, perfect. When they pulled apart, Clara was breathless. Was that okay? Adrian asked. Clara laughed, a sound full of joy and relief. More than okay. Adrian pulled her close again, and they swayed together, lost in their own world. For the first time in her life, Clara felt truly seen, truly valued, truly loved. Have you ever had a moment that changed everything? Drop a comment and share your story. And if you're loving this, don't forget to subscribe, because the ending is going to be worth the wait. The days following the gala felt like a dream Clara was afraid to wake up from. Everything had changed, yet nothing had changed at all. She still arrived at the office every morning at 8:30. She still managed Adrian's schedule, coordinated meetings, and handled correspondence. But now, when their eyes met across the conference table, or when his hand brushed against hers as he handed her a file, there was something more. A secret they shared. A truth they both held close. They were careful at work, professional, appropriate, nothing that would invite gossip or speculation. But in the quiet moments, when the office emptied and they were alone, the walls came down. Adrian would knock on her office door with 2 cups of coffee, and they'd talk, really talk, about things that had nothing to do with quarterly reports or client retention. He told her about the foster homes he'd lived in, about the loneliness that had shaped him, about building his company from nothing because he didn't know how else to prove he mattered. Clara shared things she'd never told anyone, about the fear that kept her awake at night, about watching her mother fade a little more each day, about the guilt she carried for wanting something more than just survival. And slowly, carefully, they built something together, something real. It was a Tuesday afternoon, 3 weeks after the gala, when Clara's world tilted again. She was reviewing budget projections when her phone rang. The caller ID showed her aunt's number. Clara's stomach dropped. She answered immediately. Hello? Clara. Her aunt's voice was tight with barely controlled panic. You need to get to the hospital now. Clara's blood ran cold. What happened? Your mother collapsed. The ambulance just took her. They said... Her aunt's voice broke. They said it's serious. Clara was already grabbing her bag, her hands shaking. Which hospital? Mercy General. I'm on my way there now. I'll be there as fast as I can. Clara hung up and stood, her mind racing. She needed to leave. She needed to go. But she had meetings scheduled, reports due. None of that mattered. She rushed out of her office and nearly collided with Adrian in the hallway. He caught her by the shoulders, his expression immediately shifting to concern. Clara, what's wrong? It's my mother, Clara said, her voice trembling. She collapsed. "I have to go to the hospital." Adrian didn't hesitate. "I'll drive you." "No, you have the board meeting in 20 minutes. "I'll reschedule." His tone left no room for argument. He pulled out his phone and fired off a quick text, then gently took Clara's arm. "Come on." The drive to Mercy General felt like it took hours, though it was only 15 minutes. Adrian drove with calm efficiency, one hand on the wheel, the other occasionally reaching over to squeeze Clara's hand. She held on tight, trying to keep the panic at bay. "She's going to be okay," Adrian said quietly. "You don't know that." "You're right, I don't." He glanced at her. "But I know she's strong, just like you." Clara's eyes burned with unshed tears. She looked out the window, watching the city blur past. When they pulled up to the emergency entrance, Adrian parked in a no-parking zone and turned off the engine. "Go," he said. "I'll park and meet you inside." Clara nodded and bolted from the car. The emergency room was a chaotic blur of harsh fluorescent lights, beeping machines and hurried voices. Clara rushed to the reception desk, barely able to get the words out. "My mother, Eleanor Benson. She was just brought in." "Room 12, the receptionist said, pointing down the hall. "Through those doors." Clara ran. She found her aunt standing outside room 12, her face streaked with tears. "How is she?" Clara asked breathlessly. "They're working on her now," her aunt said. "They won't let me in." Clara looked through the small window in the door. Doctors and nurses moved around her mother's bed with urgent precision. Machines beeped. Someone called out numbers Clara didn't understand. And in the center of it all was her mother, small, frail, barely visible beneath the wires and tubes. Clara's knees buckled. Her aunt caught her, holding her upright. "She's going to fight, Clara. Your mother is a fighter." Clara wanted to believe that, but looking at her mother now, she looked so breakable. A few minutes later, Adrian appeared at her side. He didn't say anything. He just stood there, solid and present, and when Clara reached for his hand, he held on tight. An hour passed, then 2. Finally, a doctor emerged from room 12, pulling off his gloves. His expression was serious, but not hopeless. "Family of Eleanor Benson?" he asked. Clara stepped forward. "I'm her daughter." The doctor nodded. "Your mother experienced a severe drop in blood pressure combined with respiratory distress. We've stabilized her for now, but her condition is critical." Clara's chest tightened. "What does that mean?" "It means the cancer is progressing faster than we anticipated," the doctor said gently. "The treatments are becoming less effective. We need to discuss next steps, more aggressive intervention or," he paused, "palliative care." The words hit Clara like a physical blow. Palliative care, end-of-life care. "No," Clara said, her voice shaking. "There has to be something else, another treatment, another option." "There are clinical trials," the doctor said carefully, "experimental treatments, but they're expensive, and there's no guarantee." "I don't care about the cost," Clara interrupted. "If there's a chance, I want to take it." The doctor exchanged a glance with the nurse beside him. "These trials can run upwards of $200,000. Insurance typically doesn't cover." "I'll find a way," Clara said firmly, though she had no idea how. The doctor nodded slowly. "I'll have someone from oncology come talk to you about the options. For now, your mother is sedated but stable. You can see her, but only for a few minutes." "Thank you," Clara whispered. The doctor left, and Clara turned to her aunt. "Can you give me a minute?" Her aunt nodded and stepped away. Clara looked at Adrian, who had been silent through the entire exchange. "I'm sorry," she said. "You should go back to work. I'll be fine." "Clara." Adrian's voice was firm. "I'm not leaving you. You don't have to. I know I don't have to." He stepped closer, his eyes searching hers. "But I want to. Let me be here for you." Clara's defenses crumbled. She nodded, unable to speak past the lump in her throat. Adrian pulled her into his arms, and Clara let herself break just a little, her face pressed against his chest. "We'll figure this out," Adrian murmured into her hair. "I promise." Clara was allowed into her mother's room a few minutes later. The space was small and sterile, filled with the rhythmic beeping of monitors. Her mother lay in the bed, eyes closed, her breathing shallow but steady. Clara pulled a chair close and took her mother's hand. It was cool and thin, so fragile Clara was afraid she might break it. "I'm here, Mom," Clara whispered. "I'm right here." Her mother's eyes fluttered open, unfocused at first, then landing on Clara's face. A weak smile touched her lips. "Clara, don't talk," Clara said quickly. "Just rest." Her mother squeezed her hand with what little strength she had. "You're not alone anymore." Clara frowned. "What?" "That man," her mother said softly. "Adrian. He loves you." Clara's eyes filled with tears. "Mom, let him," her mother whispered. "Don't be afraid of being loved." A tear slipped down Clara's cheek. "I need you to fight, please. There are treatments, trials." "I'm tired, sweetheart. I know. But please, just a little longer." Her mother's eyes drifted closed again, but she held onto Clara's hand. Clara sat there, watching the rise and fall of her mother's chest, and made a silent vow. She would find a way, whatever it took. When Clara finally emerged from the room, Adrian was waiting in the hallway with 2 cups of terrible hospital coffee. He handed one to her. "How is she?" "Stable for now." Clara took a sip and grimaced. "This is awful." "Yeah, hospital coffee usually is." Adrian watched her carefully. "What did the doctor say about the trials?" Clara looked down at her cup. "They're expensive, really expensive." "How much?" 200,000, maybe more." Adrian was quiet for a moment. Then he said simply, "I'll cover it." Clara's head snapped up. "What? No, absolutely not." "Clara! Adrian, I can't ask you to do that." "You're not asking. I'm offering." "It's too much," Clara said, her voice breaking. "I can't." Adrian set his coffee down and took both of her hands in his. "Listen to me. I have more money than I could ever spend. Money I've earned, money I've invested, money that just sits there doing nothing. If I can use it to save your mother's life, then that's the best thing I could possibly do with it." Clara shook her head, tears streaming down her face. "I can't let you—" "Yes, you can." Adrian's voice was gentle but firm. "Because that's what people do when they care about each other. They help. They show up. They don't let the people they love face impossible things alone." Clara stared at him, overwhelmed by the enormity of what he was offering. "I love you, Clara," Adrian said quietly, "and I love you enough to do whatever it takes to keep the people you love safe." The words broke something open inside her. Clara threw her arms around his neck and held on tight, sobbing into his shoulder. Adrian wrapped his arms around her, holding her like she was the most precious thing in the world. "Thank you," Clara whispered over and over. "Thank you." "You don't have to thank me," Adrian murmured. "Just let me be here for you." Over the next few days, Adrian moved quickly. He contacted the oncology department, met with the specialists, and enrolled Eleanor in the most promising clinical trial. He handled the paperwork, the payments, the logistics, all of it, without hesitation. Clara tried to find ways to thank him, to express the depth of her gratitude, but words felt inadequate. Her mother began the trial treatment on Friday. The doctors were cautiously optimistic, but warned that it would be a long, difficult road. Clara took a leave of absence from work to be with her mother. Adrian didn't just approve it, he insisted on it. "Your mother needs you," he said. "Work will be here when you're ready." But even during her leave, Adrian visited the hospital every evening after work. He brought flowers for Eleanor, books for Clara, and food that was better than anything the hospital cafeteria offered. He sat with them, talked with Eleanor about old movies and gardening, and made her laugh even when she was exhausted from treatment, and Clara watched, her heart swelling with a love so deep it scared her. 3 weeks into the trial, Eleanor started to show signs of improvement. Her color returned. Her breathing became easier. The doctors were surprised but pleased. "It's working," one of the oncologists told Clara. "We're seeing a measurable reduction in tumor size. It's early, but this is very promising." Clara cried tears of relief and joy. That evening, when Adrian arrived at the hospital, Clara met him in the hallway and kissed him, hard and full of gratitude and love. When they pulled apart, Adrian was smiling. "Good news?" he asked. "The best," Clara said. "It's working. The treatment is working." Adrian's smile widened, and he pulled her into another kiss, this one slower, deeper. When they finally broke apart, Clara rested her forehead against his. "I don't know how I'll ever repay you," she whispered. "You don't have to repay me," Adrian said. "Just be happy. That's all I want." 2 months later, Eleanor was discharged from the hospital. The trial had been successful beyond anyone's expectations. The cancer was in remission. She would need ongoing monitoring and maintenance treatments, but the worst was behind her. Clara brought her mother home to the apartment, which Adrian had quietly arranged to have deep cleaned and stocked with groceries, flowers, and everything they might need. Eleanor settled onto the couch with a contented sigh. "It's good to be home," she said. Clara sat beside her, taking her hand. "It's good to have you home." Her mother looked at her with knowing eyes. "So when are you going to admit you're in love with him?" Clara laughed. "I'm not hiding it anymore." "Good, because that man is head over heels for you." "I know," Clara said softly, "and I'm head over heels for him too." That weekend, Adrian took Clara to dinner at a small, quiet restaurant overlooking the river. They sat by the window, the city lights reflecting off the water, and talked about everything and nothing. When dessert arrived, Adrian reached across the table and took Clara's hand. "I have something I want to ask you," he said. Clara's heart skipped. "Okay." "Move in with me." Clara blinked. "What?" "I know it's fast," Adrian said quickly, "and I know we've only been together a few months, but I don't want to spend another night without you. I want to wake up next to you. I want to come home to you. I want to build a life with you." Clara stared at him, her heart racing. "What about my mother?" she asked. "She can come too," Adrian said without hesitation. "I have a house with more than enough space. She can have her own wing if she wants. I want you both to be somewhere safe and comfortable." Tears filled Clara's eyes. "You'd do that?" "I'd do anything for you," Adrian said simply. "So what do you say?" Clara looked at the man sitting across from her, the man who had seen her at her lowest and lifted her up, the man who had saved her mother's life without a second thought, the man who loved her, not in spite of who she was, but because of it. "Yes," Clara whispered. "Yes, I'll move in with you." Adrian's face lit up with pure joy. He stood, pulled Clara to her feet, and kissed her right there in the middle of the restaurant. And for the first time in her life, Clara felt like she was exactly where she was meant to be. 6 months later, Clara stood in the backyard of Adrian's home, their home now, watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of orange and pink. Her mother was inside, laughing with Adrian's housekeeper over something Clara couldn't hear. She was stronger now, healthier, her treatments reduced to just quarterly checkups. Adrian came up behind Clara and wrapped his arms around her waist, resting his chin on her shoulder. "What are you thinking about?" he asked. "How much has changed?" Clara said softly. "A year ago, I was barely surviving. I was invisible. And now—" "And now?" Adrian prompted. "Now I'm loved," Clara said, turning in his arms to face him. "Really, truly loved." Adrian smiled and brushed a strand of hair from her face. "You were always worth loving, Clara. It just took the right person to see it." "And you're that person?" "I'm trying to be," Adrian said, "every single day." Clara rose on her toes and kissed him, soft and sweet and full of promise. When they pulled apart, Adrian reached into his pocket and pulled out a small velvet box. Clara's breath caught. "I was going to wait," Adrian said, his voice a little unsteady. "Plan something elaborate, make a big gesture, but I realized I don't want to wait anymore." He opened the box, revealing a simple, elegant ring that caught the last rays of sunlight. "Clara Benson," Adrian said, his eyes locked on hers. You walked into my life when I didn't even know I was looking for you. You've made me better, kinder, more human, and I don't want to spend another day without knowing that you're mine and I'm yours." Tears streamed down Clara's face. "Will you marry me?" Adrian asked. Clara didn't hesitate. "Yes," she said, laughing and crying at the same time. "Yes, yes, yes." Adrian slipped the ring onto her finger, his hands trembling slightly. Then he pulled her into his arms and lifted her off the ground, spinning her around as she laughed, a sound of pure, unfiltered joy. When he finally set her down, they were both breathless. "I love you," Clara said, her hands framing his face. "I love you so much." "I love you too," Adrian replied, his voice thick with emotion. "More than I ever thought possible." They kissed again, longer this time, the world falling away until there was nothing but the two of them and the promise of forever. From inside the house, Clara heard her mother's delighted gasp. She pulled back from Adrian to see her mother standing at the window, hands clasped over her mouth, tears streaming down her face. Clara laughed and waved, and her mother blew her a kiss. Adrian took Clara's hand, the one now adorned with the ring that symbolized their future, and pressed a kiss to her knuckles. "Ready to tell her?" he asked. "She already knows," Clara said with a smile. "I think she's known for months." That evening, they celebrated with champagne and takeout from Clara's favorite restaurant. Eleanor sat in the living room, radiant with happiness, holding Clara's hand and admiring the ring every few minutes. "I knew it," she kept saying. "I knew from the moment I saw the way he looked at you." "How did he look at me?" Clara asked, though she already knew the answer. "Like you were the only person in the world that mattered," Eleanor said simply. Adrian, who was in the kitchen opening another bottle of champagne, called out, "That's because she is." Clara's cheeks flushed and her mother squeezed her hand. "You deserve this, sweetheart," Eleanor said softly. "After everything you've been through, after all the ways you've put yourself last, you deserve to be loved like this." "I never thought it would happen," Clara admitted. "I thought people like me didn't get fairy tale endings." "People like you?" Eleanor's expression turned serious. "Clara, you are kind, resilient, intelligent, and beautiful. You have always been worthy of love. You just needed someone brave enough to see past the walls you built." Clara looked over at Adrian, who was now pouring champagne into 3 glasses, completely at ease in the home they now shared. "He didn't just see past them," Clara said quietly. "He helped me tear them down." The next few months were a whirlwind of wedding planning, though Clara and Adrian both wanted something simple and intimate. "I don't need hundreds of people," Adrian said one evening as they sat together reviewing venue options. "I just need you, your mother, and the people who actually matter to us." Clara agreed wholeheartedly. They chose a small garden venue on the outskirts of the city, a place with old trees, flowering vines, and a view of the hills beyond. The ceremony would be in the late afternoon, with dinner and dancing under string lights as the sun set. Clara asked Jenny to be her maid of honor. Adrian asked his business partner and oldest friend, Michael, to be his best man. The guest list was small, fewer than 50 people, but every single person there would be someone they truly cared about. "You won't believe who just showed up." His response came immediately. "Are you okay?" "I am. I'll tell you about it tonight." "I love you." Clara smiled. "I love you too." The day of the wedding arrived with clear skies and perfect weather. Clara stood in the bridal suite of the garden venue, looking at herself in the full-length mirror. Her dress was simple but stunning, ivory lace with delicate sleeves and a flowing skirt that moved like water. Her hair was styled in soft waves, pinned back with small white flowers. Her makeup was natural, glowing. She looked like herself, but also like someone new, someone who had walked through fire and come out stronger. Eleanor sat in a chair nearby, dabbing at her eyes with a tissue. "You look so beautiful, sweetheart," she said, her voice thick with emotion. "Don't cry yet, Mom," Clara said with a laugh. "You'll ruin your makeup." "I can't help it," Eleanor said. "My baby is getting married." Jenny appeared in the doorway, radiant in her pale blue bridesmaid dress. "It's time," she said with a warm smile. Clara took a deep breath and turned to her mother. Eleanor stood slowly, still regaining her strength but healthier than she'd been in over a year. She took Clara's hands. "I am so proud of you," she said. "Not because you're marrying a wonderful man, though he is, but because you fought for yourself. You chose to be brave, you chose to be loved." Clara's eyes filled with tears. "I learned that from you." Eleanor smiled. "Then I did something right." They embraced, holding each other close. When they pulled apart, Clara wiped her eyes carefully and picked up her bouquet, a simple arrangement of white roses and greenery. "Let's go get you married," Eleanor said. The ceremony took place beneath an arch covered in climbing roses and ivy. 50 guests sat in white chairs arranged in neat rows, the late afternoon sun filtering through the trees above. Adrian stood at the altar with Michael beside him, looking devastatingly handsome in a tailored grey suit. But when the music started and Clara appeared at the end of the aisle, his expression transformed. He looked at her like she was a miracle. Clara walked slowly, her arm linked with her mother's. Eleanor had insisted on walking her down the aisle, and Clara wouldn't have wanted it any other way. When they reached the front, Eleanor kissed Clara's cheek and placed her hand in Adrian's. "Take care of her," Eleanor whispered. "Always," Adrian promised. Eleanor took her seat, and Clara and Adrian turned to face the officiant. The ceremony was short and heartfelt. They exchanged vows they'd written themselves, promises of love, partnership, and unwavering support. When Adrian slipped the wedding band onto Clara's finger, his hands were steady, his eyes full of love. And when the officiant pronounced them husband and wife, Adrian pulled Clara into a kiss that felt like coming home. The guests erupted in applause. Clara laughed against Adrian's lips and he smiled, holding her close. "I love you, Mrs. Steele," he murmured. "I love you too," Clara whispered back. The reception was a joyful celebration filled with laughter, dancing, and toasts that made everyone cry and laugh in equal measure. Michael gave a speech about how Adrian had been insufferable before he met Clara, and how she'd made him human again. Jenny told embarrassing stories about Clara's early days at the bank, and how she'd always known Clara was destined for something more. Eleanor stood, though she was still weak, and raised her glass. "To my daughter," she said, her voice clear and strong. "You have always been my greatest joy, and to Adrian, who saw what I've always known, that Clara is extraordinary. Thank you for loving her the way she deserves." There wasn't a dry eye in the room. As the evening went on, Clara and Adrian danced beneath the string lights, surrounded by the people they loved most. "This is perfect," Clara said, resting her head on Adrian's shoulder. "It is," Adrian agreed. "But you know what makes it perfect." "What?" "You." Clara pulled back to look at him. That was incredibly cheesy. "I know," Adrian said with a grin, "but it's true." Clara laughed and kissed him, and they swayed together as the music played and the stars came out above them. 3 years later. Clara stood in the nursery of their home, gently rocking a tiny bundle wrapped in a soft yellow blanket. Her daughter, Ellie, named after Eleanor, had been born 2 weeks earlier, and Clara still couldn't quite believe she was real. Adrian appeared in the doorway, 2 mugs of tea in hand. He set one on the side table and came to stand beside Clara, looking down at their sleeping daughter with an expression of pure wonder. "She's so small," he whispered. "She's perfect," Clara said. Adrian wrapped his arm around Clara's shoulders, and they stood there together, a family. Eleanor, now in full remission and healthier than she'd been in years, had moved into the guest house on the property. She spent her days gardening, reading, and doting on her granddaughter. Life wasn't perfect. There were still hard days, challenges, moments of doubt. But Clara had learned something important over the past few years. She had learned that she was worthy of love. She had learned that strength wasn't about never falling. It was about getting back up. She had learned that sometimes the worst moments lead to the most beautiful chapters, and she had learned that she was no longer invisible. She was seen, she was valued, she was loved, and that made all the difference. 5 years after that cold Tuesday afternoon, when Adrian Steele walked into Riverstone Bank and changed everything, Clara stood on a stage in front of 300 women at a leadership conference. She'd been invited to speak about her journey, from struggling secretary to executive assistant to eventually chief operations officer of Steel Investments Holdings. Adrian had offered her the promotion 2 years earlier, and though Clara had been terrified, she'd accepted. And she'd thrived. Now she stood in front of a room full of women who reminded her of who she used to be, women who felt invisible, overlooked, not enough. "I used to think I had to make myself small to survive," Clara said, her voice steady and clear. "I thought if I stayed quiet, if I didn't ask for too much, if I just kept my head down, everything would be okay." She paused, looking out at the sea of faces. But I was wrong. Because the moment I allowed myself to be seen, really seen, everything changed. She told them about Harris, about Adrian, about her mother's illness and the clinical trial, about learning to accept help, to believe in herself, to let love in. "You are not too much," Clara said, her voice growing stronger. "You are not too little. You are exactly enough, and you deserve to be seen, valued, and loved. Not in spite of who you are, but because of it." The room erupted in applause. After the speech, dozens of women came up to thank her, to share their stories, to tell her she'd given them hope. And as Clara stood there, surrounded by women who were finding their own voices, she thought about how far she'd come, from the shy, invisible girl who thought she didn't matter, to the woman who knew, without a doubt, that she did. Adrian was waiting for her in the lobby when she finished. Ellie was on his hip, her curls bouncing as she waved at Clara. "Mama!" she squealed. Clara's heart melted. She walked over and scooped her daughter into her arms, kissing her cheek. "How did it go?" Adrian asked. "It was incredible," Clara said, her eyes shining. Adrian smiled and kissed her forehead. "I'm proud of you." "I'm proud of me too," Clara said, and she meant it, because she had fought for this life. She had chosen courage over fear, love over loneliness, hope over despair, and she had won. If this story touched your heart, we'd love to hear from you. Drop a comment telling us what resonated with you most. And if you haven't already, please subscribe and hit that notification bell, because stories like this are what we're all about. Thank you for being here, thank you for watching. And remember, you are seen, you matter, and you are worthy of love.